are live.
Hey,
How are you doing today, Angela?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I am making it. I will say that I'm a little stuffy today. So if you hear me sniffling through this conversation, please excuse me. But otherwise, I'm doing great. You know why?
Why?
I am swagged out.
Oh, look at him,
Y'all,
y'all.
look at me. If you're watching me live, if you're
Look
watching
at him,
the
y'all.
video, check out the drip, y'all.
Oh,
I
he's
got my
repping, okay?
I am. I got my From Cover to Code sweatshirt on. It's got our great From Cover to Code logo. I even got the stickers.
Yay!
Indeed. Thank you so very much for hooking me up with those. So now I
Of
can,
course.
like I said, drip out of the house, and people are like, "Oh, what's that? What's that?
Isn't it
Who are these
cute?
people?" Like, "Oh, that's me. That's my homie."
I love it. We got someone. Good afternoon, Tech Coach Ralph. How you
Oh,
doing?
Tech Coach Ralph. Let me drop him into the
Thank,
welcome.
thank you for joining us. Thank you for
Thanks
joining.
for joining us, Tech Coach Ralph. Yeah, if you're not following Tech Coach Ralph, check him out on YouTube
Yes.
at Tech Coach Ralph. He's just dropping all of the career development,
Oh,
quality assurance gems. You got to check him out.
I'm gonna follow. You got to follow in
Please
me.
do, indeed.
All right.
Um, yeah, we're on episode 2 of this season.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we picked up the book Programming AWS Lambda, and we're talking about chapters 1 and 2. We're just getting started.
We are getting started. So before we jump into anything, what is your experience with Lambda? What have you done with it? What use cases have you seen? Not even have you done, but what kind of use cases have you seen for Lambda?
I really enjoy using Lambda in my courses where I talk about CI/CD
Yeah.
because it deploys super quick. It much faster than and easier than having to build a server, get logged into the server, get permissions, and all this other kind of crazy stuff. And it's crazy cheap. So I like deploying it for just like teaching people how to interact with web services. It's a great candidate for those types of demonstrations.
Awesome. Okay. So as I was logging into my AWS account, I was thinking, have I ever done anything with Lambda? Lo and
Right.
behold, I had. It was so long ago. But again, I haven't had any recent use cases for it. So that was my excitement about reading this book to refamiliarize
Mm.
myself with it and Java, which I haven't seen. I don't know. It has to be at least 10 years. And this was a great opportunity. This is a learning opportunity for me. This is a stretch for me. So I am all in on this book. I am all in.
Yeah, same. I'm familiar with AWS Lambda, but I want to take it to the next level, particularly with this very odd, strange language called Java.
Very
Um,
strange.
yeah, like I said, I'm all over the snake gang. I'm down with Python. I can mumble and hum along with Node.js and JavaScript. But if you give me some Java, I'm going to probably zip my lips.
Okay.
So I'm looking at this as an opportunity too to get more familiar with Java and the build environments and what it takes to actually develop a Java API, a backend, and then get that deployed on AWS Lambda.
Okay. Well, we're both here to learn. So, how do you want to kick this off? Chapter 1, it's enter serverless. It just really
Yes,
starts from there. I mean, which we all know that there is a server involved, but we are not responsible for it. It is not
right,
our what do I say? That's not my ministry. I don't have
right.
to do any servers just to run serverless. Yeah, what are your thoughts? I think that's a great idea. Although understanding that there's a new acronym, BAAS.
I
Not
wasn't
heard that one
familiar
before.
with their take on the back end as a service.
Yeah.
Now I've heard of like Firebase
Yes.
and applications of that sort of genre, but I had not really heard them referred to as back end as a service. I get it. I totally understood what they were talking about, but I didn't think that was as common as functions as a service,
It isn't.
software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as, and so on and so forth. All the as a service type things that we're familiar with. But okay, throw out a new one, and I can dig it.
Okay. So that term back end as a service, yeah, I never heard of it. I've worked in Firebase many moons ago.
Hmm.
But in the book it says it came into prominence with the rise of mobile application development. And again, maybe if there are any mobile application developers out here, let me know if you've actually heard that term. And then it's sometimes referred to as mobile backend as a service. I
Mm,
think we're getting out of hand. But the idea
right.
is using internally managed products as part of the application development process. And it's not really unique to mobile development.
Yeah.
It's also in front end development as well. So that is basically me paraphrasing a chapter out of the book because I
Perfect.
had highlighted it. I am reading this book on O'Reilly. I am
Okay.
a huge fan. I did buy a copy of the book, but I said I was going to return it because I
Mm,
was
mm.
very disappointed in chapter 2, and we'll get to that a little bit.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to it. I'm hemming and hawing because again, I like to doodle in the book, but because it took a while for the book to get here, and O'Reilly is at my fingertips. I don't miss a beat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Check on O'Reilly, see what they're up to.
Well, I
Yeah.
have the book right here in front of me, bunch of highlighting, no notes in the margins, of course, but a lot of things in here kind of caught my attention. So
Mhm.
what else about chapter 1 did you
Yeah. Well, I appreciate their like taking it for people who weren't familiar with maybe even the cloud, taking it all the way, like you mentioned, the history of the cloud and how we fast forward it to, came to be this functions as a service. And the only thing I wanted to add to that particular part was there are servers there. They're just somebody else's servers, like somebody else is running the servers, right? It's just not us. Um, and the other thing that they offered was, and I got, I love my slides, so I brought some slides with me today. They had this criteria for what a serverless platform should represent, and they mentioned some of the other cloud platforms and their serverless platforms, but they went into detail on
very
how
much
they sort of validated AWS Lambda as a serverless platform. So if you are watching us, if you're watching the video version of this conversation, then you'll see my slide. If you're listening, I'm going to read it for you as we kind of go through this discussion. Um, but the first point was no long-lived host, right? And we talked about that. It's quote unquote serverless. There's a server there. We just don't care about it.
it
We
is not
don't,
our ministry. We don't have to
yeah,
deal with it.
we don't know where it is. We don't know who deployed it. We don't know what the operates. Well, we might know what the operator, but you know what I'm saying? We have very little, if any, concern about the server. And it's not even going to be there for maybe a few milliseconds running our process. The next point is auto scaling. The service should manage the workload in such a way that any workload that we throw at it, it should scale to handle it without us having to do anything. And so AWS Lambda will create more copies of our function to manage the workload if we're sending multiple requests to the function. So it fits that bill, checks that off. And another one, and I mentioned this one as far as the cost goes, the usage cost can go down to zero. And this is important because if you have that server that's running and maybe it's not doing anything, it's just like sitting there waiting for work, it's still burning money. It's still raking up your AWS bill. But if you have a Lambda function, it's going to sit there and you only pay for when that Lambda function is executed. Once it's executed, you only pay for the time that it uses. So if that function only takes half a millisecond to run, then you're only going to pay for that half a millisecond. And I think in the book they said they are very particular about the fractional costs, and you pay in 100 millisecond increments.
That's fantastic. That
I
means
know, right?
you are not overpaying by any
You're
stretch. No.
exactly. So you can get millions of executions from a function before you're actually going to accumulate any costs. And I don't have the actual, dollar amount or nickel penny amount for these millions of requests, but it varies by region.
Mhm.
So you have to look in the cost calculator to figure that out. And I'll run through these last two really quickly. The performance is not in size or count. So in other like instance-based workloads, you might say, well, I've got 10 instances serving this particular workload, and they are T2 smalls or M3 mediums or whatever. So you can like very easily get an idea of the size and count of the infrastructure behind the service. But for Lambda functions, you really just kind of gauge it off of the RAM. And I think today in this modern version of Lambda, you can also gauge the CPU size a little bit as well. But it's not like how many functions you have running, because it auto scales. You don't really care how many functions it takes. They're going to do that for you automatically. You just say, hey, I got this function. It's going to need half a gig of RAM. So give it that, and just let it do what it does for how long it takes. And then lastly, you have implicit high availability, meaning that your service isn't really ever going to go down. It's always going to be there. Well, I shouldn't say it's never going to go down. The responsibility for the service being available is on AWS. As long as that region or data center where your function is deployed is up and running, then you're good to go. If that data center goes down, that availability zone in the same region, they're going to move it to another availability zone, and it's still going to be up. Now, if that region goes down, that's a whole nother story. You might have to take some action there. And I think the authors even said they'll get into that later on in the book. So we'll see how that we'll see how that kind of plays into things. But they validated that, hey, this is what a serverless platform should offer. And Lambda checks off every single one of these.
Awesome. Well, that is, in a nutshell, this is what serverless is, and that's the criteria that differentiates it from other types of workloads. I mean, usually we have to configure our own auto scaling, and like Michael said, if we're spinning up systems, those hosts have to be there. That uptime, we're talking about running these systems even when there's nothing really important going on the workloads. The ability to scale is great, but having to configure it and make sure your applications can use that functionality, and the implicit high availability, not having to think about your functions running when they need to run and doing what they need to do is really it's really a bonus for using serverless. So they talked about what AWS is. It went through the regions, the global map, who uses it, how do you use it, and the fact that they made mention, if you didn't know, each service must be fully usable via public API, which makes AWS very programmatically friendly. Everything can be done via API, which is great, because if you're doing a lot of running production apps, running a lot of apps, doing a lot of scaling, doing a lot of queries, a lot of API calls within those applications, especially if you're doing something called infrastructure as code, not talking serverless, but if you're actually running workloads in the cloud, making sure that you can write those API calls to do what needs doing. And then, of course, saving them in your change control system all the time. We're going to talk about that. But this chapter 1 was basically a get to know. And if you're not familiar with AWS, hopefully this wasn't a down and dirty walk through AWS, but it does tell you a little bit about differentiating between server side, functions as a service platforms. I think they talked a little bit about containers. I could be conflating it with something else I just read. But and we all see that there's a use case for Lambda, because the fact that it is so inexpensive to do that level of processing, if you have an application that can benefit from functions as a service, why wouldn't you use it, right? Because you're going to be keeping costs down. One little note. Remember, I don't know if any of our listeners remember this, but I remember when A Cloud Guru was like the wave back in the day, right? And their claim to fame was everything on their platform ran from Lambda. Now, I don't know if that's the case. That means when you clicked on a course, there'd be a Lambda function doing all the things and spinning up your learning environment. Now that it's owned by Pluralsight, I have no idea what's going on the back end. Hopefully I can find a blog post or something. But that always fascinated me, that they were able to go from nothing to this huge conglomerate of a learning platform that we've all known to grow and know and love. So yeah, like what else do you think uses Lambda? Like,
Well,
oh,
I'm trying to think of like some examples for our case. Let me put a pin in that. I'll come back to
okay,
that. But you jogged a brain cell on a couple other things that I recalled from the introduction. The other benefit of using AWS Lambda, or probably any cloud platform's serverless function, runner, is that it's integrated with everything else. And because it is an event-based trigger, then you have all these integrations and permissions to interact with all the other services that you got there. And I did have one counterpoint with the authors. I
oh,
took an aside with the authors of this book. And really, it's a minor one. I don't want to make some big drama here, but
no,
they said, and I'm paraphrasing, that there is less effort and time to operate a Lambda function. Now, in some cases, I'll give you that.
mm-hmm.
But or actually, I'm sorry, they said less effort and time to operate a Lambda application. And so I will say that there's more effort to architect and orchestrate an application when it's composed of multiple functions. So for the example that you gave with the Cloud Guru, for example, they've got the login function, they've got the user profile function, they've got the or the course retrieval function, checklist of all the courses that you've viewed, maybe the ones that you haven't viewed, maybe your wish list, that type of. So they have all these different functions that they have to manage to build their application, right? And that comes with some orchestration. If your functions aren't ready to receive events, or if the response time from one function is too late, if you haven't set it up synchronously or asynchronously for that process to complete, so that whoever's making the call to the function, they time out or they lose interest or whatever the case is, then that takes some orchestration and some very high level architecture to get that all put together. And I'll just wrap by saying, is it cheaper than probably running the same thing on a server? Yes. Is it scalable, more scalable? Absolutely. You can make a server-based system scale. Lambda is going to be easier for that scalability part. But is it easier? I say it depends.
And as are all things in technology.
Yeah.
The
Right.
answer is 90% of the time, it depends. It depends on your particular use case. It depends on so many different facets that overall, yes, if you're saying just the ease, but like you just mentioned, a huge application, that is a lot of programmatic work happening to make sure that it orchestrates itself perfectly. Because as you know, end users who are paying for services, we have no tolerance for
Mm-hmm.
systems that don't work appropriately, and we get used to this level of service. So yeah, that's I
Yeah.
parrot you. I'm just going to parrot you. So what else?
No, it's all good.
What else are we What else are we jumping on in chapter 1?
Well, the one thing they also mentioned was that they mentioned API gateway, which
Yes.
historically has been the interface to Lambda functions that serve some sort of web request or respond to some sort of HTTP request. And one feature that I swear I was jumping up and down in celebration when AWS released this feature is what they call a Lambda URL. And if you don't know what that is, a Lambda URL lets you execute a Lambda function directly using a URL that AWS provides without having to provision an API gateway. So what does that mean? It means, number one, you have fewer resources in your stack. You don't even have to worry about API gateways. And API gateway works great with Lambda functions, particularly, and I talked about like architecting and orchestrating a large number of functions. If you're in that sort of scenario, you want API gateway to kind of manage the function that's being executed depending on the request. But if you have one little simple function and you need to access it over the web, Lambda URLs just like save the day. And I don't know how many functions that I had. Well, okay, so you answer the question, what runs on Lambda? And I'll give some examples. So one of the teams that I used to support, we had a lot of web applications deployed. And I will say that the certificates were not managed very well. So we would have sites where the SSL certificate would expire. And I'm like, guys, this doesn't make any sense that we should be getting alerts from our users or from the IT staff saying, hey, you need to update this certificate. So I was like, why don't we just write a Lambda function that runs every day and it just goes out, checks all the site. We just put the sites in a text file. It'll go out, it'll download the certificate from the site, check the expiration date. If the expiration date is good, move on to the next one. If it's bad, then send an alert to Datadog or New Relic or wherever our monitoring is. And yeah, it worked perfectly. So that was a good example of that. And we didn't have to use a API gateway for it because it ran kind of asynchronously, just kind of, it ran on a schedule actually. So we didn't even have to, well, we could run it manually, but we didn't have to depend on it running. It just kind of worked by itself. We set up a schedule and it just happened. And I'm trying to think if there's something that I missed in that diatribe, that soliloquy that I was giving. But anyway, Lambda URLs, love them. API gateway is cool if you got a lot of functions. And also you can time Lambda functions to run on a schedule as well.
Awesome. I did find a page with a bunch of customer use cases that are running Lambda. Some of these services you may have heard before. Netflix.
There you go.
Realtor.com. There's quite a few here. So if you just look up Lambda resources customer case studies, you're going to find some huge customers out there, T-Mobile, that are using it. So if you are customers, that you are using it on a regular basis. And I mean, most of us are Netflix users at this point in time. Wait, aside, does anyone remember getting CDs in the mail with Netflix? Okay.
Yes, I do.
Does anyone remember the service that would let you rent video games through the same service where they would come in the mail in the little envelope and a bunch of video games?
Can't say I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't think I ever used it. Yeah.
Yeah, my kids used it. So that was
Okay.
huge. But from that, we're to Netflix, where we are having it, our movies being spun up, and our likes and our history are all what comes to us and how we can interact with it. It's running a lot of Lambda in the back end. So yeah, I'm off of that high horse. I wasn't going to be happy until I found some other use cases.
There you go.
A cloud guru, but there's quite a few out here. Yeah. So what else?
Well, we got through AWS or the introduction to serverless in chapter 1. In chapter 2, we started to get more hands-on with the Hello World example that they gave. And I think we even had one to share with the folks that are watching us live. If you're listening to us down the road, apologies if you can't see the source code that I'm sharing on the screen, but it's very easily retrieved if you walk through the steps in chapter 1 where they talk about setting up your AWS account, logging into the console, creating a hello world function, and then testing it directly from the console. It's pretty much what I have displayed here on the screen. However, I believe in the book they use Node.js and JavaScript. For my particular example, because I am a Pythonisa, as this great LinkedIn user has commented, I'm showing their comment on the screen now.
People.
Yeah, these are my folks. So when you come to Hello World with me, I'm like, come on, y'all. Let's take a look at Python, see what they're talking about. But anyway, yeah, just a couple clicks in the console, and they give you the code. It's pretty straightforward. It's a good outline of what a Lambda function looks like. With literally, it's a function. It's the Lambda handler, and it does stuff, right? This one just returns Hello World, and to run it from the console, on the test tab, you click this handy dandy test button, and you get the output. Hello World. It's right there. It's just pretty simple to really get an idea of how easy it is to run that. And I guess the other cool thing about this test screen is they give you some details on the function's performance. So the duration or the initialization took 138 milliseconds, but we were only billed for 3 milliseconds for this particular Hello World execution. Isn't that crazy?
That's couch change.
I could,
That's
yeah,
less
I
than
mean,
house change.
it's a fraction of a penny. I mean, like, how much does that even cost for real? I don't know.
I don't know. But I like the fact that, so I was able to get through the hello world as well, using the code that was the example from the book, which
Mhm.
was JavaScript, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So I did that, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It worked. And yes, once that was like it wet your palate, they wanted you to go in and set up your development environment. So I am running mine in a VM,
Mhm.
Fedora 41. It was RHEL 9, and then there was this weird thing with Open SSL that I went on ahead because I didn't want to mess up. This was an Ansible controller node, and I didn't want
Mm.
I did not want to muck it up with trying to, change the version of SSL. So then I moved over
Yeah.
to Fedora 41. You know, if you go through chapter 2, it tells you to install the CLI, and a bunch of other things. Easy peasy. Make sure you set up your AWS configure with your API with your keys, and I think it goes through creating a user. So if you're not familiar with AWS, chapter 2 just gives you this really good primer on how to get set up with using the console and creating an account. But I'm assuming if you're reading this book, you're probably past that.
Mm.
So we'll take that into consideration when we kind of explain the rest of these things. Now, there was something that I did not know. Now, I know
Mhm.
the whole Java story, but that Amazon came up with their own version called Corretto.
Yep, sure
So
did.
that was interesting. I wound up installing that version just to kind of be in lockstep with the book on my Fedora system. So everything here looks up to specs. Installing Maven, SAM CLI. I had not heard of that before. So
Mm.
again, another teachable moment for me here. And then it tells you to create your first Java Lambda project. So yeah, that's where you can download. It tells you to install a IDE. I basically took their suggestions and
Mm.
installed IntelliJ. Had not used that in a very long time. It doesn't even look the same. So, just so you know,
Wow.
it doesn't even look the same. But its functionality, I can see how it would be very good for writing Java. Um, yeah, so I opened it up, looked at the POM file, went through the rest of the files, looked at the Hello World program, and yeah, there was this building the Maven package and creating the Uber jar. There you go. So next, they want you to create an S3 bucket. Now, of course, you can do it in the console, easy peasy. But to create an S3 bucket is one of the simplest CLI commands out there. So, or you can use one
Yep.
that you already have created that's in the same region as where you're working. And yeah, the SAM deploy. I'm speeding through this. You see me? I'm going.
Yeah, you're flying.
We are flying. Um, Again, SAM is I can't remember what
Serverless application model, if I'm not mistaken.
okay. I
Let me
know
see if I can find it, and I'll get the URL for it.
okay, because I that was a new tool for me. Again, I haven't really worked a lot with uh serverless application model. You are correct. And we'll dig into it more later in the book, but I will say both of us hit a snag when we ran SAM deploy. Now,
We
I'll let
did.
you speak on your experience.
Yeah, so I'll kind of run through my setup, just to kind of do apples to apples. I also set up a VM. I chose Amazon Linux 2 or Amazon Linux 2023 for my operating system. Um, and I went through some steps to get everything set up, and I've got those documented. I'll share those here in a minute. I did install the AWS CLI. I installed Corretto 23 and 21. I installed 23 because it's the newest, but I believe Lambda only goes up to support for 21. So I installed 21 as well. And then I also installed SAM CLI, installed Maven, started going through the steps for SAM CLI, and hit a brick wall. Ran into some problems. So I'm going to go back and debug. I haven't even looked at the errors yet. It was just a whole bunch of text scrolling across the screen. And I was like, you know what? I'll save that for another day. But I do know SAM CLI works. I have used it on other projects. And let me clarify. I have not used it. I've supported developers that used it because I would spin up the infrastructure that they would deploy their functions to using SAM CLI. So I know it's legit. I know it works. We just got to get our sort of environment dialed in to figure out what we're doing with the thing. Like if there's a particular version of SAM CLI and Maven and Java, sometimes you got to get all those dependencies lined up properly. And I think once we get past that hurdle, we'll be up and running. But yeah, we both kind of hit a brick wall on it.
So I actually recorded my brick wall multiple times, but I want folks to know exactly what we're referring to, because if you're following along and you meet this same fate, if you have any suggestions on how to fix it or get behind or get from around it, please let us know, because neither of us are Java developers.
I know.
That's a struggle. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. I'm going to make sure that you can see where my book is opened. And yeah, this is me trying to present. Bear with me, you guys. I'm going to share this screen.
Take your time. Take your time.
All right. I have 2 monitors. I didn't have 2 monitors last week. Yeah, nice. Let's go over here and let's rock this bad boy out. Share. Okay. Tell me what you see, because I don't know.
I'm adding it to the stage.
I see what you see. Okay.
Yes.
Fantastic. So this was me I had run this a couple of times. So I had, made sure there were no stacks laying around. I got rid of the old stacks that I had in here from God knows what year. I think one was from 2018, just stuff that I hadn't used in a very long time. So I got rid of everything, removed the template files from my multiple attempts at running this from S3. And I ran this command called SAM deploy. Now you might not be able to see my screen. Let me see if I can make
it's a little tiny for me.
Yeah, because is that better?
No, not much, but not much. Just
so in the book,
you can describe it. It's fine.
The book says, we're going to run a SAM deploy, and we're going to, the S3 bucket, we're going to name our stack. I ran the command as it shows in the book, and it looks like it's doing something. So you see it's for deploying it with the following values. It tells me that the template already existed. I had cleaned it out so many times, and now it kicks off this CloudFormation stack. So if you've used CloudFormation, some of this may look a little bit familiar, but you're going to see here that the resource creation process was initiated. I'm actually reading it to you because you probably can't see it. My screen is just
no, we sure can't.
Just a little big. I'm trying to make it as big as it'll go, but
it's fine.
This is it saying, no, I'm not running. I'm not doing this anymore. And I'll tell you what it says. Resource creation initiated. It says resource handler returned message. The runtime, let's see. Because red and black doesn't work. The runtime parameter of Java 8 is no longer supported for creating. Oh, I got to scroll back. Hold on. Let me stop this here. No longer supported for creating or updating AWS Lambda functions. We recommend you use a supported runtime while creating or updating functions. So what that means is, of course, this is code that we got from the author's repo and pulled it down from there. So it is telling us that what they put out there, what they have in their repo, will not work in this verb because they're running, I think it mentioned somewhere they're going to be writing Java 8 code, and that will be fine because it was backwards compatible with Java 11 was backwards compatible to Java 8. And so I felt comfortable, but as time moves on,
Yeah.
AWS is not going to keep allowing deprecated runtimes in there. They're not going to keep supporting it. So I did find a link for AWS SAM CLI that for Java 8, it was depreciated in January 2024. So we missed it. But this is what I should have seen. Successfully created the stack, and then I didn't see that because I got the errors. So that's as far as we got. I never got my hello world, and I'm assuming you didn't get your hello world either. So
yeah, it's a similar problem. I think my version was too new. In that Lambda does not support 23.
Okay.
And when I initially built my lab environment, I was using Java 23. So I was like too far ahead. And in your case, you might have been using code that was too far behind. So we got to find that sweet spot in the middle, right?
So again, I'm using Java 11, Corretto, Java 11. The other versions were all recent, Maven and what else? The CLI, all pretty recent. So that's where we are. We are at the end of chapter 2, not having, resolved our little issue here.
Yeah, and if you want to follow along, I have a URL on the screen now. It's GitHub repo, github.com/cover-to-code/season2 programming AWS Lambda. I'm going to put my notes in there. If you want to contribute, Angela, your code or your notes, or just want to commiserate over the problems we're seeing, and put them in there, then that'll work as well. But yeah, I'm gonna kind of try to record what I did to build the environment and what I eventually did to get everything running with the environment that I have set up. So yeah, that will be where you can find it.
All right. So next week we are jumping into chapter 3.
Chapter 3. And you know what? What is the title of chapter 3? I'm all over the map right now, so I don't have that in front of me.
Programming AWS Lambda functions.
Okay. So this, I assume, is getting into the meat of actually developing for AWS Lambda, right? We've set up our environment. We did the hello world. Well, eventually we will get the hello world. And then we're actually going to do something a little bit more. We're going to take it to that next step to actually program AWS Lambda.
So I'll give you a quick recap of what chapter 3 includes: core concepts, runtime model invocation, input and output, timeout, memory, CPU, environment variables, and the exercises at the end will let's see. Yeah, there's a nice little exercise at the end. I'm not sure if it does what the last chapter did, where you had to walk along with the chapter as you were reading it. But we'll find out, won't we?
Yeah, I think so.
We'll find out. Yeah, well, that's it for us.
Cool. Well, enjoy the conversation as always, Angela. I am ready to debug these issues and get through chapter 3. Okay. And we'll see where we go from there, right?
Let's do it. We're going to put our thinking caps on, and hopefully, I have my fingers crossed, we can figure this out and get past this, because I want to learn Lambda. I do. Yeah. I want to refamiliarize myself with Java. Not too in depth, because I'll do it and never use it again. Unfortunately, that's not my ministry, as they say. Doing Java programming, that's in my rearview mirror. But we'll see what happens.
Indeed. And thanks all of you for joining us for this episode from Cover to Code. We will see you next week.
Awesome. We'll see you soon.